Hey guys, it's Mitch. How's it going? All right, today we're going to take a look back at 1995. I don't know if that's anybody's favorite time in comics, although I'm sure at least a few people would look at least this event as a high point. We're going to start looking today at Age of Apocalypse with X-Men Alpha. So in 1995, Marvel's X-Office was firmly in the habit of releasing line-wide crossovers on an annual schedule. You could argue it goes all the way back to the Mutant Massacre, but it builds up then to Fall of the Mutants and Inferno, and then the Extinction Agenda, and then things just started getting silly after the Image artists left. Because it got to the point where it was difficult to pick up an X book that wasn't part of some kind of crossover. The Executioner's song followed, which was the crossover that prompted Peter David to not want to work for the X-Office again, because there was no way to set up storylines in an environment where your book could get co-opted into another crossover at any moment. Then there was the Fatal Attractions thing, there was the Phalanx Covenant. I wasn't reading X-Men comics at that point anymore. It was the Fatal Attractions one that knocked me out personally. You know, we just recovered from Executioner's song. I bought every single issue of that. And now you're expecting me to do it all over again, like just a few months later? No, man. But Bob Harras and the X-Office would not be denied. Bob Harras was the editor of the X-Line in the 90s. And I think it's generally accepted now that he's one of the worst editors that Marvel ever had. Alienating all sorts of creators, pumping up artists' egos to the point where, they went and formed another company, and focusing more and more as time passed on short-term profits. Now, I think the last one was a company-wide mandate, but Bob Harras kind of went at it with gusto, to the detriment of the books, where there was no such thing as long-term planning. Character development kind of got left at the wayside so that we could just get big bombastic event issues. And crossovers were great because they prompted kids to buy like 12 issues if they wanted to find out what happened in a story. So 1995 rolled around and they started talking about what was going to be the next crossover. And after a fair bit of brainstorming, the brain trust of the X-Office, which was Bob Harras and Ben Robb, as well as the line writers Scott Lobdell, Fabian Nicieza, Mark Waid, Larry Hama, and Jeff Loeb, came upon the idea of the Legion Quest crossover, which would have the character of Legion travel back in time to try and assassinate Magneto. Only he'd fuck it up, because of course he would. And when he went to kill Magneto, he accidentally killed his father, Charles Xavier. And at first they had the usual idea to have a crossover that spanned over all of the titles, where they explored a Days of Future Past kind of world, with the idea of what would happen in this universe if Charles Xavier had never formed the X-Men. Which is fine for an idea. I mean, it's better than whatever was going on in Fatal Attractions. But then somebody got the bright idea of, wait, why don't we make this like a really big event and basically cancel all of the existing X titles for like 4 months and replace them with alternate universe variants. And I don't know who came up with that, but that was a stroke of genius, I will admit. So leading up to the event, there was all sorts of marketing, there was all sorts of hype building, there were all sorts of leaks about new costume designs, about details and changes in characters' histories, and Marvel was able to stir up a feeding frenzy leading up to X-Men Alpha. And once the event was in full swing, there was no Uncanny X-Men anymore, there was no X-Force, there was no X-Factor, none of that. Instead, we got Astonishing X-Men, and Factor X, and what was X-Force replaced with? Was that the one that was Gambit in the Externals? All right. And this was a big style over substance kind of event. Marvel was really leaning on the fact that in the wake of losing all the Image artists, they had managed to build up their stable of artists again to the point where they had a whole bunch of, kind of hot young new talent. So guys like Joe Madureira, Adam Kubert, Steve Skroce, Tony Daniel, and they really leaned on that heavily, in particular letting guys like Joe Madureira design like whatever new costumes they wanted to for the different variant costumes of the new X-Men. Which was important because that was almost like the main point of curiosity for the series. What was everybody going to look like? What teams were they going to be on? What affiliations would they have? Would good guys still be good guys? And vice versa. Which now that I think of it is still, would good guys be good guys? So no, would bad guys still be bad guys? And the hype paid off. The event was such a success. Like if you look back at Comic-Con, you look at the year-end reports for what were the most successful comics for the year, it's littered with Age of Apocalypse titles. Like I don't know if it's the most successful X-Men crossover that Marvel has ever done, but the fact that Marvel has kept trying to recreate it for the last 30 years kind of suggests, yeah, that might be the case. From other events where they shut down a line so they could introduce an alternate version, to incorporating elements of the Age of Apocalypse timeline into the 616 timeline, to just flat out revisiting the Age of Apocalypse timeline itself. Marvel keeps going back to the well, because that's what Marvel always does. So with that, let's get into this gaudy mess with X-Men Alpha. Holy shit, mine eyes hath seen the glory. So yeah, X-Men Alpha, this is the prelude chapter for the Age of Apocalypse storyline. It would also end with an epilogue chapter called X-Men Omega. Both chapters would have massively chromiumed up covers, and wraparound covers at that. And the Alpha cover here is drawn by Joe Madureira, probably at the peak of his popularity, really. You know, not quite at the peak of his ability, but he had been putting in his time at Uncanny X-Men for quite a while at this point, building up his reputation, trying to stay as close to a monthly schedule as possible, which you gotta give him props for. And I mean, his art is essentially the central pillar that this entire series is sold on. I know there are people who dug Adam Kubert's style, Steve Skroce, Chris Bacalo. I love Chris Bacalo. Not enough to learn how to pronounce his name right, but still. Like, there was a lot of quality art going on around this time, but it really is all about Joe Mad. Like I said, I wasn't reading X-Men comics at this time. I did want to read like every issue of this crossover, but particularly the Astonishing X-Men issues by Joe Madureira. You know, his manga meets Art Adams style. I wouldn't go so far as to say that it was unfamiliar, even to most comic readers at that time. But nobody was doing an Americanized manga style as slick as Joe Mad, not even close. So we get us a great wraparound chromium cover here featuring all sorts of characters and all sorts of new costumes. It's super exciting, y'all. Finally, all the speculation about the changes to the X universe, they were all going to be confirmed or something. And we were going to get Joe Mad to walk us through it. It's not quite Joe Mad. It almost looks like Joe Mad. It ain't, though, because this is going to be drawn by Roger Cruz, which is understandable because Joe Mad's doing his own thing on Astonishing X-Men. He can't exactly fit in like bookend issues around those monthly issues as well. So what did the X Office do? They hired Roger Cruz and, you know, a couple other guys and told him to draw as much like Joe Madureira as possible. Not taking into account that there was a language barrier and the fact that Roger Cruz was still living in Brazil. So, you know, communication was a little bit fitful. Instructions were coming in over fax, not even over the phone. And references were coming in by FedEx. So when Marvel Editorial says, make this look exactly like Joe Madureira, Roger Cruz went, oh, you mean exactly. Got you. And essentially traced off of Joe Madureira art. And because he was in Brazil, he wasn't in New York, he wasn't going to any kind of Marvel functions or conventions or anything like that, he didn't understand that he had overstepped. Because, of course, you can't go around just swiping another artist's art. You know, you got to try and make it look like thematically like Joe Madureira. Not exactly like Joe Madureira, but, you know, the distinction was lost in the translation there. And he had no idea that he had done one of comics' most, like, egregious faux pas by outright copying another artist's art until months later when there was a bit of blowback with Joe Mad. So, I mean, we could talk about the art in this a bit, but it's going to be tough because a lot of it is just going to be stuff that Roger Cruz traced off of Joe Madureira. So, I mean, if we're not going to talk too much about the art, that means we're going to have to spend a lot of time talking about the story, and there's not a whole lot of that. But anyway, we'll do what we can. We'll try to muddle through. So the plot for this storyline is going to be that since Xavier was assassinated, Magneto decides that he believes in Xavier's dream after all, and he's the one who's going to found the X-Men. But he does it a little bit too late, because the events of Xavier's assassination were noticed by Apocalypse, and he decided to launch an attack on America about 10 years earlier than he did in regular continuity. So I guess that would have to be in the mid-70s. And he essentially takes over North America. Doesn't seem to focus too much on the rest of the world. That's what he wants. And what he's decided to do is attract all mutants to his side who, you know, want to join up. Everybody else can get the fuck out of America. Anybody who sticks around, they end up part of the corpse pile. So kind of standard dystopian future stuff. And we've got a mystery protagonist to start things off with. They like doing this a lot, where they introduce a character who's all hooded and stuff. So for a second, you're supposed to go, oh, who's this character? I don't know. Wait, do I know him? And this is Bishop. He's time traveling all over the place. He followed Legion back to when he assassinated Xavier. So he knows exactly what happened. And he's been following Magneto around, I suppose, and just trying to get by in the new world. So that's where we're starting things out here, with him just kind of, crawling around the corpses. Where is he? This is Seattle, I think this is. Yeah. The narration is fine. This is going to be written by Scott Lobdell, who isn't a particularly good writer. He's just not. But he is trying on this He's kind of one of the main writers for this event. And I think he's realizing that this is a huge opportunity for him, so he's going to try his ass off. Which is good, because we've seen it where he doesn't try on stuff like Wildcats X-Men, and man, does that make for some shitty comics. And, Bishop's thinking deep thoughts. This city sucks. All people are dead. So dead. Man, you look so dead, buddy. And then some little girl comes running around the corner. And she's running from something. She's one of the last few humans. And turns out she's being chased by one of Apocalypse's culling squads, which is being led by, I think this is Eunice the Untouchable, who gets a brand new Joe Madureira designed suit. I'll say, the look so far is not bad at all. There's a whole lot of work going on in these pages. Again, he might be swiping like every pose here, every face, I don't even know. Some of these faces don't look too much like Joe Mad, so, maybe not. Some of them look, that one almost looks like Joe Quesada, really. But there is still a whole lot of drawing going on, so, that is a good thing. So anyway, Eunice and the culling squad, yeah, they're just after the girl. They don't really give much of a shit about the other guy. Although he should be on, gene scanners, that there was another human in the vicinity. So you get the impression Eunice is going to take this out on the culling squad. But he hits Bishop with a force field. Force field doesn't do anything, of course. Bishop absorbs it, which Eunice is super confused about. Until he realizes, wait a minute, this must be a mutant. It takes him a little while to realize it, too. I don't think Eunice is meant to be too bright. So, a bit of a standoff between Eunice and Bishop, but, Eunice still has at least some of his culling squad members left here. They get the drop on Bishop, and I guess they're closing in here, but that is when we get some cavalry come to the rescue in the form of the new X-Men. So, this is the show, basically. What characters are going to be on the X-Men? What are they going to be wearing? Are their powers any different? Are their personalities any different? If there was a story in here as well, that would certainly be nice, but I think the focus of this is basically going to be the new mangified X-Men are going to punch on Apocalypse's goons until eventually Apocalypse gets punched in the face. Probably all sorts of them will die because it's an alternate dimension. You can do that kind of shit. So let's just see some spectacle, and that's what Roger Cruz is going to give us. So the X-Team in this version consists of newly redesigned versions of Sabretooth, Wildchild from the Mutant Liberation Front, Blink and Morph, both of whom were characters who I assumed were introduced in this crossover. I've assumed that for about the last 30 years. Didn't realize it actually been introduced in the pages of, Uncanny X-Men and the regular X-Men comic in the days leading up to the crossover. I think everybody thought Blink was cool, and I also think everybody thought it would be okay if Morph just kind of disappeared in this crossover. We've also got the leader of the X-Men, Rogue, and her husband, Magneto, as well as Quicksilver, Storm, Iceman, and Nightcrawler. I don't think Storm does a damn thing in this entire issue. But, that's a pretty good splash with some pretty Joe Mad-looking characters, right? Like Wildchild in particular here. That must have been traced directly off. Same over here. Anyway, we're just going to get a dumb fight between the X-Men and Apocalypse's culling squad. But that's okay, because this issue really isn't about story. We're kind of fulfilling our purpose here. Let's see the new X-Men. Now let's see them in action. And as far as action pages go, these are pretty good. It's a nice dynamic page layout. Scott Lobdell isn't bogging us down with too much narration, and he's not even indulging in too many gags. At least not yet. No, we're basically copying the same page layout, only over a double page spread this time. As the punching continues. So many punching. Morph demonstrates the extent of his usefulness by turning into a wall. But then Eunice gets the drop on Magneto. He's got a plastic gun with non-ferrous shells. But instead of killing Magneto, like any good Apocalypse goon should, he tries to tell Magneto to tell his students to back off. But what he doesn't realize is Magneto has a bit of a death wish. Doesn't really care if he gets shot in the head. And then it's kind of a moot point as Iceman freezes up Eunice to the point where he just kind of shatters. And it's potentially kind of a gruesome death, actually, although Scott Lobdell, cartoonifies the hell out of it, with Eunice going what? I can't move! Freezing! And again, no! As his body turns into splinters under him. That is what you would say, right? Just oh, this is so bad! Iceman calls out Magneto for his death wishiness. Magneto's it doesn't matter. Quicksilver would have caught the bullets anyway, asshole. We get our updated version of Iceman, where he doesn't have facial features, but he does have shoulder spikes and ice hair. That does seem very much like a Joe Mad kind of design. All right, so in the wake of the battle, Magneto and Quicksilver are going to have a chat. It's not a particularly interesting chat, but we need to update the readers. Just in case they didn't see all the marketing stuff about what this crossover is about, where Apocalypse has control of the country, and Xavier's dead, and he's carrying on his legacy. And, if Xavier hadn't died, I so would have been a villain, son. And Pietro's like, what? And he's like, no, totally, I would have killed everybody. And nobody's particularly concerned about that. Oh, we're still talking. Awesome. Yeah, it's all just like Xavier was so cool, Xavier was so smart. If Xavier was here, probably Apocalypse wouldn't take over, and you know what? He's right about that. So I guess the self-pitying is kind of deserved. Anyway, eventually Magneto snaps out of his reverie. Blink tells him that Sabretooth has that leftover mutant who saved the little girl, and he won't talk for Sabretooth for some reason. So Magneto has to come over and facilitate things, takes the hood off, and what do you know? It's Bishop, who Magneto recognizes, a little bit at least. Apparently Bishop has not spoken in the last 2 decades, so I guess since Apocalypse took over, okay, sure. And he's forgotten how to say more than 2 words at a time. As he yells, "You murderer! Your fault! All of it!" Oh, I guess that's 3. Well, he's leveling up as he goes, Again, very Joe Mad looking expressions. But yeah, Legion! Warp time! Killed Xavier! Let him die! Not our world! All twisted! Your fault! So, Bishop's kind of been demoted to raving lunatic. And Magneto calms him down by slowing the blood flow of iron to his brain. Which feels like if Magneto can do that, this probably shouldn't be the first time we're seeing it. And as Magneto starts to fly away, he insists that he has no idea who Bishop is, even though he did a little bit of a double take when he saw him. Everybody saw it. You're not fooling anybody. All right, so from there, we're going to cut to, I guess this is in like Apocalypse's headquarters, palace, something like that, where the Beast, only here he's the Dark Beast, is doing some genetic experimentation on the Blob. We get Scott Lobdell trying to do Claremont-type Hank McCoy loquaciousness. I'm going to spare you from that. And then the Blob breaks free. He's not really supposed to have super strength, is he? Like originally? Like, yeah, maybe he's meant to be like King Kong Bundy strong, but not like, super strong. So when he picks up McCoy here, I mean, it's not exactly the first time I think that they've done that with the Blob, but still. That kind of thing is just like, all right. So this could have been anybody then. And he's going to mash the Dark Beast. But he gets his shoulder zapped open by Prelate Havoc. So Havoc's working for Apocalypse. He's about to blast him again, but Blob swats him away, and then he's going to do a big old belly flop on both of them. But Havoc's brother, Cyclops, shows up to save the day. So Cyclops is also working for Apocalypse, and he's only got the one eye, which is, it's a nice kind of play on the Cyclops thing, honestly. The long hair is kind of terrible, but it is 1995. I guess it is kind of in style. And, Havoc and Cyclops are going to bicker. That's what they do. We got to set up their relationship a little bit, where they're not buddies, they're not brotherly, all that. They're constantly in competition. There's all sorts of resentment. And then in walks Mr. Sinister, who apparently has been acting as sort of a father figure to both Havoc and Cyclops. Which, I guess is kind of in line with the stuff that we found out in Inferno. That makes sense if Xavier never intercepts. Which one of them? I guess it was Cyclops, yeah. On the way to the orphanage or something, or the way from the orphanage. I can't remember exactly now. But yeah, he's all fatherly and stuff. I got to assume this is one of the first times we're seeing Sinister acting in a way that's not, like a cartoon villain. Because that was what he was at first in Inferno. And later on when he showed up in X Factor. I don't know how many times he would have appeared in between his X Factor appearance and here. But, again, this feeds back into the point of this book, this crossover really, which is people are on weird sides. And they got weird new costumes. How's that new Sinister costume look? It's okay. Honestly, the old Sinister costume design is a little bit iffy, depending on the artist. Apparently, Sinister is sad because he's helped to set up Hell on Earth, and now he's going to have to go away or something, so he's not going to be able to enjoy it. Cyclops is like, what you mean Hell on Earth? Like, isn't this awesome? And he doesn't seem to mean that, like, we get to kill people. He seems to mean that, like, just, he's hopelessly naive and he believes anything Sinister tells him. We do also find out that apparently Apocalypse is in talks for some kind of treaty with the humans. I assume this is humans on other continents. Which Cyclops hopes will go well, because again, he's just hopelessly naive. Alright, from here, we're going to cut to Archangel, or Angel now, I guess Apocalypse never intervened for him. But yeah, no, it's Warren Worthington III, and he's set himself up a little eyrie, where basically people can just kind of party and ignore the post-apocalypticness all around them. Which is a decent enough choice for a guy like Angel, I think. He introduces the singer for the night's festivities, which is Scarlet, and I believe this is a character who has only previously appeared in the Meltdown miniseries, starring Havoc and Wolverine before this. So we're digging deep for the cameos on that one. Anyway, Angel's got somebody who's looking to talk with them, so he goes and meets with them. Turns out it's Gambit. Gambit is all full of angst and hair volumizer. That is just kind of getting out of control there. But he needs to meet up with Magneto, and Angel is the one who knows a little bit about everything, so he can get Gambit in touch with him. What he wants in return is for Gambit to never bring his shaggy ass back here. And Gambit agrees. It's all very cordial. Alright, so back at, well, we're in Westchester, so I guess this is at Xavier Mansion. Rogue is going to go and check in on her son, Charles, who's being looked after by a nanny. I don't know if this is nanny and orphan maker nanny, I guess, right? And yeah, she's checking in on her son, Charles. I guess Joe Mad had not drawn a child in any of the sample pages that Roger Cruz was given, so he had to wing it. And woof. Better luck next time, I guess. Roger Cruz got to be absolutely fine, so it's not a huge deal or anything, but man, oh man, that's not a great looking kid. Okay. I'm pretty sure he swiped this from a Jim Lee shot, actually, looking at it. Is that X-Men number 8? I don't know. It's kind of close. Different size panel, so it feels like he had to kind of work off it instead of being able to trace it directly. It didn't quite work out as well. If that's what he was going for, who knows. Anyway, Rogue is looking after her Abomination's son, and mopey-ass Magneto comes in, almost smiles for a second, but then goes back to being mopey-ass. So then he's going to go down and interrogate Bishop some more. Going to take that mopiness out on somebody. Bishop isn't exactly cooperating. He keeps accusing Magneto of some kind of crime. Magneto still has a little bit of supervillain in him because he smacks Bishop around magnetically somehow. I guess with all these Joe Mad suits, there's probably all sorts of like metal buckles and shit people are wearing. I wonder how many X-Men working for Magneto are just like, I think I'm going to accessorize with plastic just in case. So anyway, Magneto knocks out Bishop, and he's going to ask Rogue to go and absorb Bishop's life force because there are no telepaths anymore. All the telepaths have been executed, as far as anybody knows. This is like a strict edict from Apocalypse. So by Rogue absorbing Bishop's life force, she'll also absorb his memories. Alright, so from there we're going to cut back to Apocalypse's headquarters / palace / pad, where Sinister is talking with Abyss, which is a character who I think does exist before. Again, before the Age of Apocalypse crossover. Never heard of him before, though. We haven't yet been introduced, though, to Holocaust, which is Apocalypse's son. These are apparently 3 of the 4 horsemen of Apocalypse. The 4th one is Mikhail, which I assume is Colossus's brother. I swear I haven't read these things in 30 years, and, they don't like to explain anything. It's just Lost-style mystery boxes, one after the other. Again, I assume Mikhail is Colossus' brother, because that's the most prominent Mikhail in the X universe, as far as I know. But yeah, apparently he has run away, which is bad, because horsemen aren't supposed to do that. So then we get, we get our new version of Apocalypse. Forget your Walt Simonson character design, now we get the Joe Mad version. It's okay, but I prefer the Walt Simonson version personally. And he's talking a little bit about the peace accord that's being brokered between him and the humans. And of course, it's all just a smokescreen to get the humans to drop their guard so that he can launch, another attack probably. Sinister doesn't like the idea because that will just provoke the humans into counterattacking, sparking an actual war between the two sides, which will wipe out the populations of both sides. He doesn't like that too much because then there won't be too much left for him to experiment on. But Apocalypse is all for it because whoever survives out of that mess is going to be the kind of people Apocalypse wants to survive anyway. So that's all fine. I mean, that's in character for Apocalypse. I don't mind that at all. And Holocaust, of course, is all on board with this. Sinister, not so much, as he grimaces. And from there, we're going to cut to another dude in a cloak who we're not sure who he is, but of course we know who he is because the claws are going to be a little bit of a hint. They're like right in the middle of the page here. But yeah, this is Wolverine and Jean Grey. They're apparently looking for something called the High Council. So the way they're going to find them is to run through their territory and wait to get jumped. But yeah, Logan pops his claws, on the one hand, because the other hand is gone now. That was part of the Joe Mad redesign. Again, we did see it on the cover here. There we go. He's got the little tin can on his wrist. You do have to maul up your characters a little bit, you know, like this is supposed to be a more brutal world, which we've seen with stuff like Iceman killing Eunice the Untouchable and then kind of cracking jokes about it. And, you know, Cyclops having lost an eye, stuff like that. That all works, but apparently the High Council is Moira McTaggart and Brian Braddock and Megan. So apparently Jean Grey and Logan were tasked with acquiring some kind of chip for the High Council to decode, and their fee for doing so is they get full access to whatever's on the chip. So again, we're setting up another mystery box here. I'm thinking maybe Weapon X is a title I should probably check out at some point. I mean, like, that was written by Larry Hama. I don't know if he had too much fun with the whole post-apocalypse thing. He might have. I don't know how much he enjoyed the crossover aspect. But it's also drawn by Adam Kubert, so I mean, that's probably one of the better titles in this crossover. Oh, and Logan and Jean are all smoochy, because Jean and Scott aren't a thing, so she settled for the next best thing. Anyway, from there, we're going to cut back to Magneto, back to interrogating Bishop. She's just going to start the process here. We're not going to actually see too much of the process. Okay. And, yeah, everything starts getting a little crazy. Sparks start flying everywhere. Roger Cruz doesn't have a direct reference for Magneto's close-up. But I guess Magneto is getting memories of that Bishop has of the alternate timeline. Not exactly sure why. Like, he's like trying to extend some kind of magnetic something field so that Rogue can touch Bishop's skin and absorb his power without his power absorbing her power. So I guess somehow that field that Magneto is extending causes him to experience firsthand the memories of the 616 timeline, where he sees that Xavier was supposed to live and he was supposed to turn into a villain, or, you know, at least he did in the other timeline. Oh, he even saw that he got turned into a baby at one point. That's got to be embarrassing. Anyway, Gambit, it turns out, has been hiding in the shadows, and this is his moment to emerge, because he's got the hots for Rogue, because this is around the time when they're starting the relationship between Gambit and Rogue. Not sure exactly what he does here, other than just, you know, kind of leap into the middle of everything and just kind of wave his hand. Says he's, like, pulling Rogue away from Bishop. But there's no panel showing Rogue touching Bishop, so whatever. I guess we got to rely on Scott Law to just kind of clarify what Roger Cruz isn't showing us. Sabretooth has to get all threatening on Gambit, but Quicksilver tells him to break it up, so they do. As we recall, Gambit was looking for Magneto at some point anyway. There's not a whole lot going on here, just a whole lot of yelling. Yeah, there really isn't much of anything going on there. Quick cut back to Apocalypse's headquarters, where now Sinister has also disappeared, so Apocalypse just losing Horsemen left and right. Back with Magneto and Rogue, who are just kind of coping with the memories they saw in Bishop's head. And, we're going to do a big old zoom out so we can get some reboot-style graphics in. And Scott Lobdell is going to, like, tut-tut at Magneto for only being worried about things that are going on the planet and not being aware that that the crystalline entity is zooming in on Earth. I don't remember this part of this crossover at all. Yeah, those graphics suck. I would have much rather seen Roger Cruz at least try something. Oh well. That is it for X-Men Alpha. You know what? It's fine. It gets the job done. That's about it. Like, it kind of lives up to the hype, but it's like a C+, because the art isn't exactly what you want. When you look at the cover here, it's like, oh shit, it's Joe Mad. When you look inside, it's like, it's Joe Mad. Wait, is it Joe Mad? Ah, shit, it's not. And the writing doesn't grab you. It's just filling space. You know, it does it a little better than Scott Lobdell does sometimes, but it's not going to be the same kind of thing as if you had Larry Hama scripting this, or Peter David. Or, honestly, even Fabian Nicieza, I think he could do a better job. But what it does do is it gives you all sorts of X-Men characters in all sorts of weird new situations, wearing all sorts of funky outfits. And honestly, that was all anybody wanted out of this thing. It does give you a little bit of information about what's going on in the rest of the world, but that's for the 4-issue miniseries to expand upon later, and they would. You know, usually with better writers. So we will check out at least one of those miniseries. We're going to take a look at Astonishing X-Men coming up pretty soon. We'll just look at all 4 issues in one go. That's another thing that's scripted by Scott Lobdell, so I don't think I'm going to be spending much time, reading the dialogue or anything. We can just talk about the Joe Mad art. As an A-set, I think one of the most memorable things that came out of this crossover was the trade paperbacks of those miniseries, where every one of them was released in gold foil. And all I wanted was like all of those things. Didn't care too much about what was happening in the crossover. I don't think I bought a single issue, to be honest. But goddamn, did those gold foil trade paperbacks look incredible. Just wanted like 8 of them on a shelf somewhere. So anyway, that is going to do it for Age of Apocalypse for now. We will do more Age of Apocalypse in the future. So thanks very much for watching, guys. If you like this video, please hit the like button. Helps with the algorithm stuff. Hit subscribe if you want to see more. If you're watching on mobile, hit the hype button. Helps this video get seen by more people. Don't forget you can support me on Patreon. Linktree is in the description. And you can follow me on Instagram and DM me there for commissions. But yeah, that'll do it. Thanks again for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.